All right, let's get into it. So, we're talking about a giant robot from a Japanese anime back in the 1970s. You know, sounds pretty standard, right? Well, not exactly. This is the incredible story of Grendizer, a show that did okay in Japan, but became an absolute cultural titan almost everywhere else on Earth.
And that's really the big question we're tackling here. What was it about this specific robot, this particular story, that somehow blew past its home market and achieved this legendary status, especially in places like Europe and the Middle East? It's a fascinating journey.
So, before we dig into the why, let's just take a moment to appreciate the sheer scale of what happened. Grendizer's international success wasn't just big. I mean, it was completely unprecedented.
Just look at this contrast. In Japan, Grendizer pulled in a very, very respectable 20.9% average viewership. That's a solid hit by any measure. But in France, where it was called Goldrake, the legend goes that some episodes hit a 100% TV rating. 100%! The entire country, apparently, just stopped to watch a giant robot save the world.
And it wasn't just France, not by a long shot. See this number? That's over 1 million. That's how many copies of the theme song sold as a single in Italy, where the show was called Goldrake. Over 1 million copies for a cartoon theme song. The show was an absolute pop culture juggernaut. And you know, its impact went even deeper than record sales. In the Middle East, Grendizer wasn't just a cartoon. For a whole generation of kids, it became this powerful symbol, a story about defending your home, about fighting for what's right against a much more powerful enemy. And we are definitely going to circle back to why that resonated so deeply. So, what was the show actually about? Well, the answer, and honestly, the key to its massive global appeal, it all comes down to its hero. So, the main character isn't some hot-headed teenager who just stumbles into a robot. No. He's Duke Fleed, a refugee prince. His home planet was completely destroyed, and he barely escaped to Earth with Grendizer, which was like the divine weapon of his people. He's this man living in exile, just trying to have a quiet life until, his past comes back to haunt him. So the whole 74-episode saga is this classic story of loss and eventually redemption. It starts with total destruction, forcing Duke into hiding on Earth, but peace doesn't last. He's reluctantly pulled back into the fight, reawakening Grendizer to defend his new home. And he doesn't fight alone. He builds a team, finds allies, and it all leads to this massive final battle to save our planet. And the ending? It isn't just a simple victory. It's actually kind of bittersweet, as he says goodbye to Earth to go back and try to rebuild his own world. Okay, now that mention of Koji Kabuto on the timeline is super important for understanding Grendizer's kind of complicated place in Japan. See, it wasn't a totally new thing out of nowhere. It was actually tied to one of the biggest names in mecha history. So Grendizer was officially the third entry in the famous Mazinger franchise, but it was a completely radical departure. Mazinger Z was pure hot-blooded action, a fiery Japanese teenager defending his home from some mad scientist. Grendizer, on the other hand, was way more like a romantic, almost tragic space opera about a sad alien prince. The whole tone was just completely different. And yeah, this created a little bit of friction. Fans were pretty surprised to see the legendary hero Koji Kabuto basically demoted to a sidekick role. And behind the scenes, the creator, Go Nagai, was having disagreements with the studio over creative stuff and, crucially, over royalties from the show's huge success overseas. So while the viewership was strong, the toy and model sales didn't quite hit the same highs as its predecessors. And that's what gave it this reputation of being, a little less successful at home.
But hey, that was then. The story doesn't just end in the 1970s. Oh no. Decades later, that massive global fan base has ignited a huge modern revival.
And this isn't just some whisper of nostalgia we're talking about. It's a full-on renaissance across all kinds of media. We've got a modern video game where you get to pilot the robot yourself, a complete anime reboot for a brand new generation, and there are even officially licensed graphic novels in Europe that continue the original story. And on top of all that, the demand for high-end collectible figures has never been stronger. This is an active, thriving franchise right now.
And what this timeline really shows is that this comeback isn't a fluke. It's a planned, multi-year strategy. We're seeing this consistent, thought-out rollout of major projects one after another, year after year. This isn't just about celebrating the past. It's about building a future for the franchise and keeping Grendizer in the spotlight. So let's bring this all together. We've seen the crazy success, we've seen the modern rebirth, but why? What is at the absolute core of Grendizer's enduring power? This quote here from Professor Karim El Mufti really gets to the heart of it.
For people in regions that were experiencing conflict and injustice, the story of a powerful hero defending the innocent against an overwhelming force, well, it wasn't just entertainment. It was a mirror of their own struggles and their own hopes.
And the creator of the series himself, Go Nagai, he completely agrees. He believes the show's themes landed with such incredible force precisely because of the geopolitical realities that its audience was living through. The context, it was everything. And that, ultimately, is why it resonated. Grendizer became so much more than a cartoon, it became an allegory. The story of a prince who lost everything but found the courage to defend someone else's home, that became this powerful, universal story about hope, about identity, and about resilience that just soared across any cultural or language barrier.
And that brings us right back to today. With a whole new generation discovering Grendizer through these reboots and video games, you really have to wonder, in a world that is still full of conflict and displaced people, can this almost 50-year-old story about an alien prince and his giant robot, can it still resonate as a symbol for justice?